Good morning. Great to see everybody. Did you get some rest last night? I hope so, because I know I did. I was so tired. It's really great to see everybody here this morning, and I am honored and privileged. First of all, Sherrilyn, do you see all these beautiful people out here?
I do.
I just need a minute. This is amazing. God bless all of you. It's really, really amazing to see you and to be back together with the Women of Power Summit. So thanks for being here. I am honored and privileged to be able to have this conversation this morning with you, Sherrilyn. I have to tell you, when Butch called me up and asked me to interview you, I was dumbfounded. I am in awe of you.
Oh,
you are amazing.
thank you.
Last night, as I listened to you tell us a little bit of your story to tee up this conversation, I had goosebumps. So I want to have a conversation with you in this very small, intimate room with just a few of our sisters
Just
and
girlfriends,
a few good brothers. And let's just dig in a little bit more to the conversation we
Yeah.
had last night. Let's start with your upbringing and how you got to where you are. And by the way, I usually don't take notes, but I took notes this time because I knew I would go off script otherwise. Last night you talked about having a passion for civil rights since you were a little girl. How did you come to this work? What was it in your upbringing, your education, your family? How did you get to this place where you were committed to this work?
Well, first of all, thank you so much. I am in awe of you and of everyone sitting out here so early in the morning. I really appreciate you all filling this room with warmth. We are all the sum of all the parts, And one of the great things I think about getting older is that you're able to kind of look back and see the journey a little bit. I shared last night, I come from a fairly large family, 10 kids. We lost our mom when I was quite young, and obviously that's a life-changing experience. And so my dad was very much the head of the house, household, even after he remarried. And my father was kind of a race man. He was very politically minded. He became a social worker in Harlem. And in that period of time, I guess the FCC rules were different. There were so many programs on television about black people, about black history, about the civil rights movement. And we watched all of them. And in fact, I loved it so much, my father would call me if something was on. He would say, come down and see this or that. But he would especially call me if there was a woman who was doing something kind of in the political realm. And so that was a period when Shirley Chisholm, ran for president. I remember there was a city councilwoman in Los Angeles, Yvonne Brathwaite Burke, and of course Barbara Jordan, who we saw in the film last night. And my father would call me whenever they were, on television. So for me, I had this kind of passion and interest in social justice, and we were a big news family. We watched the news every night. There were 3 newspapers on the table at all times. And so then seeing these women, and particularly Barbara Jordan, I thought, this is the kind of woman I want to be. I want to be the person who has moral authority and who uses it, particularly for me, to advance my own community. And so I talked about being a civil rights lawyer from the time I was quite young.
Wow.
And it happened.
That is incredible. So it's actually funny. One of the things I talk about a lot as I'm mentoring, the generation coming up behind me is you have to see it to be it. So you just gave a great example of you saw it in many instances and you became it. So
yeah, I don't suffer from imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I do feel like I'm supposed to be in the rooms that I'm in, And one of the things I will say that I now realize was very important to me in terms of who I was in the family and my dad. So I'm the youngest of the 10 kids, and a bit precocious, shall we say. But one of the things that I realized with my dad, which to me didn't seem like a big deal at the time because I just kind of accepted it, was that he made clear that he thought I was really smart, and he was very emotionally distant. So that our place of meeting was around politics and stuff. But he showed me that he expected me to do great things. And so there was never a sense of limitation for me as a girl or as a woman. And I just kind of followed that path. I think you can find your way sometimes. You may not know when you're very young, you know, what you want to do.
That's right.
But for me, I did. In fact, this is the first moment in my life where I don't know what the next thing is.
This is the first time ever, huh? Mm-hmm. All right. All right. So let me ask you this. So you just said you did not have the imposter syndrome, right?
No.
A lot of women do.
Yeah.
And we spend a lot of time in our corporations talking about the imposter syndrome. So what advice would you give to anybody out there who is struggling with that voice that keeps telling her she may not belong?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's two elements to this. So first of all, probably like most of you and your families, you were raised to believe you're better. I mean, I don't remember someone saying that to me, but that was the implicit message that I was getting, certainly in the context of race, for sure. But I think for me, it's also about your own preparation and excellence. I mean, you can't just walk into any room and say, I'm supposed to be here, right? You actually have to prepare, right? So there's a little work involved. And so I don't want to make it like it's so easy. You know, it isn't. But once you have done the preparation, that's the key. I mean, that's what really carries you. And that's really the coin of the realm at LDF for our amazing staff of lawyers and activists. We're so hyper prepared.
You're ready. You're ready.
You know, I say all the time when we go to trial that I don't actually care whether the judge is conservative or not. If we get a chance to actually try our case, I like our chances.
So let's talk about this for a minute. So you spent 10 years at LDF, and you mentioned last night, you actually set this up perfectly for this discussion this morning. You talked about 2020 being the most tumultuous time that you had.
Okay.
Thanks. During that period. It was exhausting. It was hard. I mean, we had so much upheaval. Like, how did you navigate that? How did you lead your team? How did you keep them motivated? How did you keep yourself strong and empowered?
Well, it's a great question. There were actually two moments, maybe three. This was a pretty strenuous tenure for civil rights over the last, 10 or so years. And I remember when I was offered the job and I was wringing my hands because I knew what it would mean. I knew I would have to throw myself into this thing. And I remember Elaine Jones, who was the former director counsel. She was the first woman director counsel of the Legal Defense Fund. I'm the second woman. And she told me, Sherrilyn, you are the right leader for such a time as this. And I can tell you that looking back over the last 10 years, I was the absolute right person for LDF for that 10-year period. The first crisis that was incredibly tumultuous were the beginning of the cell phone video presentations of black men, being killed, unarmed black men being killed by police officers. And we have been working on this issue for decades. When I was a girl in Queens, Clifford Glover was killed. I was 10, he was 10. He was killed by the NYPD. So this is something we've been exposed to our whole lives. But obviously the videos, first beginning with Eric Garner saying, I can't breathe in New York, and then the uprising in Ferguson, where young people were really activated around the killing of Mike Brown, really started a kind of a movement and a moment. And watching those videos was incredibly difficult. Actually, for my staff, and I felt I needed to really cover all the bases to make sure that we were in the right lane when we were talking about this really contentious issue. And I was really quite fine with it. The worst period, however, was one 48-hour period in which Alton Sterling was killed in Louisiana, and we were looking at the different videos very late one night, and then I was, just watching what was happening on social media, and I said, I think there's another one. And my staff started looking, everybody was tired. I said, you all go to bed, I'll look at it. And it was Philando Castile. And I remember I stayed up the whole night because I was trying to find his fiancée, who you remember was in the car with her baby girl. And so I was calling hospitals, pulling all my contacts in the St. Paul area. I didn't sleep. And when I finally sat up in the morning, my phone was filled with all these requests from media. And that was the one day I said, I am not going to sit on a stool and talk in a TV studio. I can't. Whatever I'm going to say is not probably what I should say. And so I said, I need to be in St. Paul. It's the one and only time I've flown Spirit Airlines because that was the only seat I could get. I don't even want to talk about it, really, seriously. It was like, whoa. But I had to get to St. Paul. It was the only flight I could get that morning.
By whatever means.
Only that one time. And so that was like an incredibly difficult time. 2016 was the second time when Trump was elected. We did not expect it. In fact, I remember I had been doing election protection work in Alabama on election day, going from polling place to polling place. And then I was going to fly home in the evening. I flew back to Washington, D.C. I said, you know what? This will probably be the election of the first woman president. Let me be with my oldest daughter. And so I flew to be with her. And it didn't happen, of course. But most importantly, I knew what it would mean for my staff. I didn't sleep the whole night. And I said, I have to get back to New York. And so I got to New York. We had an all-staff meeting. And I had to figure out how to inspire. There were tears. People were concerned. The LGBTQ members of our staff, the families with, immigrant members of their family. I mean, this was personally beyond our work. We knew what it was going to mean for our work, but it was personally difficult. And so I had to inspire them. And then I thought about the larger world and what was the message. And my deputy, who will be the new leader of LDF, said, what you just said to me, you should film it. So I filmed a video that we put on social media that went viral. And I still remember the last line of it. I just sat down and wrote it. And the last line of the video was, and we're not going anywhere. Because remember, people were saying, I'm moving to Canada. And I was like, hell no, we ain't going nowhere. So Trump then almost immediately announced that Jeff Sessions would be his attorney general. And so I was like, okay, it's on. I remember I immediately put together a proposal for how LDF would become a private DOJ, a private Department of Justice. And people like Melody Hobson and others were willing to invest in that vision. And that's how we were able to staff up and do the work we needed to do during the Trump administration. I had to be clear with the staff that we had to tighten up everything in the organization. We knew that he, is a vindictive person and that we were going to do things that LDF had not done before. We don't take it lightly. Suing, 7 cabinet secretaries and suing the president. We knew what we were exposing ourselves to. We had to strengthen our cyber security, our personal security.
That's right.
Everything. And that's how we endured for those 4 years. And then 2020 came, and we knew it would be a big year because of the election and because of our voter protection work. But we did not expect COVID. And the turning point for me was the first week of April in 2020. We had already, gone remote, and I will tell you, we were one of the earliest to go remote because I just made the decision. And that's also about just leadership and protecting your people and your people seeing you protect them. We're based in New York, and I saw our governor, Andrew Cuomo, and our mayor, Bill de Blasio, kind of in a little male tussle, and I said, hey, no, we're going, we gotta go. And we went remote. We'd never done this before. The first week of April was the presidential primary in Wisconsin. And there was an effort to try to extend the time for absentee voting, which the Supreme Court turned back on its shadow docket. And so Election Day came, and there were these pictures of black people in Milwaukee standing in these long lines with masks on, in my view, literally risking their lives to vote. I knew they were risking their lives because the same day as the primary, a news story had come out showing that although black people constitute 28% of the population of Milwaukee, they were 85% of the COVID deaths.
Wow.
So people were literally, now why were they standing on those lines? Only 5 polling sites were open in Milwaukee, which normally has 185, because seniors who normally work the polls were understandably calling out because of COVID. So I have said this before, when I saw those pictures, I became radicalized. I wrote a piece in Slate about it, about just that vision of the nobility of black people who in the past had risked their lives to vote, and now we're doing it again. So we decided that we were going to litigate to try to extend absentee voting in a variety of southern states. We decided that we needed an effort to try to recruit young poll workers so that our seniors could stay home. We ended up in a collaboration with LeBron James, who created an organization called More Than a Vote after George Floyd was killed. And together we worked and we recruited 40,000 new polling workers so that our seniors could stay home and polls could stay open. We litigated in 5 states to extend absentee voting. We did the darn thing. We did everything we needed to. I told you about suing the Postal Service. We did whatever we needed to do to make sure that black people could cast their votes and do it as safely as possible. We absolutely exhausted ourselves, but the feeling of knowing that we had left it all on the field, there's nothing I feel that we didn't do in 2020.
Right.
And the result was the highest turnout that we've ever seen. Don't let people say, oh, since 1916. 1916, women couldn't vote, and most black people couldn't vote. This was the highest turnout in a presidential election ever.
Wow.
It was incredibly consequential, and I know that LDF played a role in saving American democracy. And that's important. In part because one of the goals I had when I took the job was that I found this in my report to the board the first year at our annual meeting. I just shared it with the board at my last meeting with them. And I had talked about wanting to recast civil rights as democracy work and to move it into the center of the conversation. Civil rights work is not something that we do on the side to help black people. Everything about civil rights work makes America better. Makes America better. And I felt that we were being ghettoized, as though what we were doing was something over here and then like America solving America's problems. No, we changed the course of American democracy in the 20th century with Brown versus Board of Education. We literally changed the course of American democracy. I talked with you about the litigation last night on behalf of women with school-aged children. We did all of that work, and we don't get credit for it. And when I'm sitting in rooms full of business people who are not you, but who are white men and captains of industry, I tell them, you owe us.
Yes.
You owe us. Because when you travel around the world and you're an American businessman, that carries with it an imprimatur of a country that is a place of equality and opportunity and all the stuff we say out in the world, no matter what's happening back at home. But who gave you that story? How did you get that story? You got that story because some people were beaten on a bridge, they didn't give up, they continued marching.
That's right.
You got that because some little children were willing to walk alone into a school full of hostile white people. That's how you got it. It wasn't free. And we have never calculated the dividend of what we have given to America in terms of reputation and global authority and power.
So Sherrilyn, let me ask you this. So there are so many, I mean, you have done so much, and LDF has done so much, but there's still so much to do. I mean, it's exhausting, right? So, you know, as you look out here at all of these beautiful sisters, with, I mean, the amazing women and a few good men, right? What should we all be focused on? I mean, and what can we do? There's so much. I mean, you gave us a great call to action last night in making our calls to our senators, right? But what should we be doing on the ground day in and day out? I mean, there are voter suppression, police brutality, racial discrimination in our workplaces, in our communities, all these disparities. How can each of us make a difference, and where should we focus?
It's a good question because, you know, I try always to talk to civilians. By civilians, I mean people who don't do what I do for a living, who don't do this 24/7. And you have to do your jobs and live your lives. And so you can't, I'm not asking you to do my job any more than you would ask me to do your job. But there is citizenship work to do.
Yes.
And this is kind of what, you know, I'm getting ready to write a book, and part of it is going to be about, well, it's frankly going to be about the way in which America's ongoing embrace of racism and white supremacy literally is threatening our democracy itself. But it's also going to be about how we reimagine what it means to be a citizen. And citizen here, I don't mean in that you have papers, you know, that show you're a citizen. I mean what it means to be an engaged and responsible part of a community. And I think we have been a little bit too weak with what we think that means. I'm sure that everyone in this room is registered to vote. If you're not, don't even tell me, because we don't want to do that. But I'm sure everyone's registered to vote, and I'm sure you do vote. But since we're here in this private little room, just, you know, girlfriends and a few good men talking, let's keep it real, okay? I'm betting that you absolutely vote every 4 years. I'm sure you do. I'm betting also that most of you don't vote every year. There are elections every year. There are elections for the school board, for the town council, for the public safety commission, for the railroad commissioner. All of these offices, and you can see it now because of this so-called anti-CRT movement in the school boards, that they matter. That's when the district judges run. That's when the sheriffs run, right? And my mantra has been, leave no power on the table.
That's right.
And we have left too much power on the table. We have allowed ourselves to be convinced that elections happen every 4 years.
That's right.
And unfortunately, that has left power for others to take who are controlling our lives. So the first thing, the easiest thing you can do is actually vote, and vote in a way in which you know who you're voting for. Because the other thing we do, and I'm including myself in this, I've done it, you go in the booth, you vote for the senator, the governor, the mayor, maybe your city council person. Then there are judicial elections, and it says, pick 3. Now you don't know who any of the 3 are, really. You don't know anything about them. I mean, has it happened to you? It's happened to me, right? And maybe you know one. And so you pick 3, maybe you pick because of the D or the R next to their name, whatever is your party affiliation, right? But again, you are giving away power. You have no idea. You haven't done the research before you went into the polling place. The sheriff, the power of the sheriff. Do you know that there's a movement afoot now of these Trumpy sheriffs who believe that they are the only real law enforcement authority in this country and that they are being activated around this voting and election stuff? Like those offices are critically important. And those of you who have power in your own communities, that's where you need to be using the power. You need to be having a candidate forum. You need to be going to the candidate forums. You need to be educating yourselves about who these people are. So I need you to vote smart, and I need you to vote thoroughly down the whole ballot, and make sure that you don't give away your power. And then after that, I would just say, even then, we still have obligations to keep our eye out, to do what I asked you to do, calling your senators. I'm going to give you the number again, because it should be just in your phone. 202-224-3121, 202-224-3121. There's really no reason that you can't call your senator every other week.
Yep.
I mean, what's your roster of issues that you care about, whether it's judges,
That's right.
whether it's confirmation, whether it's you Build Back Better, whether it's
That's
the
right.
voting legislation, whatever it is, you have to be an engaged citizen. Maybe for you, it's that you go to city council meetings, or maybe you go to a school board meeting. Just them seeing you sitting there is going to change the dynamic
right.
in the room. But instead, what we do is we vote, and then we just go off about our business and leave it to them to decide how they're going to exercise that power. So I'm really calling us to a much more engaged way of being citizens and of using our power. This is a power summit. This is what I was saying last night. Either we have power or we don't. If we have power, we should be using it. Power can sometimes be presence. It can sometimes be voting.
That's right.
It can sometimes be running for office. But we are not using all the power that we have. And as a result, others are using it for us.
It's funny. I think you also said something that I want to make sure everybody heard it. You talked about us getting educated and knowing our facts. And I think we leave a lot of that on the table. Not only when we go to the ballot. I mean, just 2 weeks ago, I was asked to moderate a panel for the UN on racism and black women and the impact of climate change on black women. And when I was asked to do this panel, I thought, now I never thought about that issue. And then I started to research it and peel back the onion. And if you all don't know it, do your research on that topic too, because the environmental issues are impacting us more than any other group around the world.
Yes, absolutely. Globally, for
Yes,
sure,
globally.
and also in this country. And as it becomes more feral and desperate, as people try to get to higher ground
Yes.
and get to places where it's going to impact our communities. Very often the communities that they herded us to are the places that they are now coming to, because the property that's at the beachfront or at the water, is dangerous. And so all of these issues, we just have to be, when I was growing up, you woke up and you read the newspaper,
That's right.
And it didn't matter what your job was, you read the newspaper. And I think we have to do the same thing. I'm very conscious of this with my Twitter feed. It's one of the reasons why I'm so ubiquitous on Twitter, is that I feel like people need places where they know there's good information and information that they can trust. And so you can follow me on Twitter, you can follow the Legal Defense Fund, but you have to decide that you're going to engage with these other ideas and be aware of what's going on.
2 last questions for you, and then we'll open it up. I want to get personal for a minute, okay? So we just talked about all of these issues that you've had to navigate. It's personal, you know, it was your job. How do you withstand on your, like, internally, mentally, emotionally? Because one of the things we know, even during the pandemic, they talked about the increase in depression and anxiety among black women in particular. I mean, it went up generally, but for black women, because we're carrying everything and everyone, you have been carrying some serious stuff, right? How do you sustain yourself and your spirit?
You know, well, I guess 2 things. One is, you know, the back room of your life, right? Your family, you know, my family, my faith. You know, before I come out on a stage, I'm always saying 3 prayers in my head. You know, asking God, let me not shame you, let me not shame my people, let me not shame my family. Those are my 3 things at all times. So knowing that my family is proud of me, having them at my back, super important. My faith, super important. Feeling like I am walking in what is my assignment is awesome. The second thing is I get to do this work with amazing people.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
I do believe there are more of us than there are of them. When I say that, I mean people committed to equality and justice and dignity and love, and so I get to do the work with amazing people, and I also feel like I'm really good at it, and I have to say there's a joy in that.
That's great.
You know, even when it's incredibly hard, I never feel like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? You know I do know what to do.
Yes.
And that's an incredible feeling as well. I have my moments. I was really, really angry at the confirmation hearing the other day.
Yeah.
You know, so I have those moments of incredible, just, you know, because I kind of feel like enough is enough, you
Yes,
know?
that's right.
I'm kind of just over it,
Yep.
you know? So there are those moments. There are moments when America keeps revealing itself, and much of what it's revealing is quite, you know, horrifying. And so there are moments when I always say I'm never surprised, but there are moments when I'm, you know, when the mom of Kyle Rittenhouse went to a Republican dinner, you know, a few weeks after he killed those 2 people, and she was greeted with a standing ovation. Even I was like, so I thought it was kind of a shared thing that we didn't want our children to, like, kill people. I didn't think that was like a Democratic thing or a black thing or the idea of making this young man a hero. He's done something traumatic. He is traumatized even if he doesn't know it. And unfortunately, without treating it as trauma, it may turn into something quite ugly and likely will. But that was a moment where I was just like, you know, come on. January 6th didn't freak me out. What freaked me out was 2 weeks later, you know, everybody at least in one political party saying it was okay, and it was just like tourists. Like, that stuff really did disturb me. But I will say the last thing is, when these terrible things happen, I am painfully aware that they are a response to our power. If you look at what happened in 2021 with all the voter suppression laws, they were a response to what we did in 2020 when I just said we just laid it out. They were a response. So we had the highest turnout in the presidential election, and then we turned around, and of the 5 million black people who voted in that Georgia presidential election in November, 97% of them came back out for the special election, and that's unheard of. That's unheard of. That's unheard of. So when Georgia then, you know, passes its voter suppression law in March, it's a response. You know it's a response because why else would you have in that law a provision that makes it a crime to give water to somebody standing on line to vote? Why? Because they know that in Fulton County, Georgia, in the presidential primary, black people stood on line for 9 hours to vote. So it is responsive to precisely the anti-CRT legislation. It is not anti-CRT. If you read the legislation, it tries to prohibit teaching about subjects that might cause feelings of discomfort, guilt, or shame on account of race or sex. Why? It is a response to the outpouring that happened after George Floyd was killed, when white people went out on the street. It was the largest multiracial protest in the history of this country, the largest civil rights protest in all 50 states in June of 2020. And that scared them.
Yes.
Because it showed that when empathy is awakened within white people, they too will risk going out on the street and getting beaten by police to stand for what's right.
That's scary.
So now what they've decided is they want to turn off that valve for their children. They want to turn off the empathy valve so that their children cannot engage with the truth about this history that might awaken their sense of empathy, their sense of compassion. It's diabolical, but it is responsive to our power. And if we don't get that straight and understand that that is what's happening, we'll just be like, oh my gosh, look at what they're doing, look at what they're doing. They're doing it because they're shook.
They're scared. That's
they're shook.
Yep. So we have to keep pushing, keep pushing, keep
and that
pushing,
keeps
keep
you
pushing.
then feeling focused because you don't feel weak.
That's right.
You operate from a place of strength because you understand that they are coming against
in response.
The strength that you've shown.
So let me ask you this. So where do you think, you did an article, you were interviewed in an article in the New York Times last weekend about the state of democracy. And I found that quite interesting there. You know, tell us, where do you think we are and where are we going?
We are in an incredibly perilous moment. An incredibly perilous moment. I always feel compelled to tell this to people because, you know, I remember sitting in Ocean Prime in 2020, before the pandemic, having lunch, which is right across the street from LDF's Washington, D.C. office. And I remember saying to the person I was sitting with, understand, because at that point we hadn't had the 2020 election yet, I said, understand, this country can become an authoritarian country. You and I will still be able to have lunch at Ocean Prime, right?
Right.
But it won't be a democracy. And I think people get it confused. We think, they'll let you have this conference. And that's how we get seduced into believing that we are not in peril and in danger. We are in peril and in danger. And what makes this moment particularly difficult, as you can see from what's happening in Europe right now, that this is a global authoritarian moment, right? It's not just in this country.
That's right.
And so, you know, and that's what social media has brought us. They have crossed the streams. So if you think that it's irrelevant whether or not we're a democracy, I have news for you. It is not irrelevant, especially for us, because you see the features of authoritarian regimes, what they look like, the kind of people they like and the kind of people they don't like. And so I think when you see what's happening in this country, it's not like something, oh, it's coming. It's happening. When you see them passing these anti-LGBTQ laws and banning books and deciding what teachers can teach and making teachers afraid and wanting children in Virginia to snitch on teachers and say whether they're teaching some divisive concept. Racism is a divisive concept. They don't want you to teach that it's real, that it really happens. When you see that, when you see voter suppression, when you see the return to the same rhetoric about police that we saw before 2015, and you see the police killings continuing, and you see no George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, which we fought for a year, understand those are the features. If you saw them in another country, you would know exactly what they were. Why do you think that when they're happening here, they are not signs of something incredibly dangerous? So I do think people have to wake up and understand that we are going to have to fight. We weren't able to get the voting rights legislation that we wanted. That means we have to somehow overcome, even more so than we did in 2020.
Yep.
Because we didn't have those voter suppression laws. We have to actually overcome, we have to overwhelm the way in which they are trying to silence us. And it begins this year. It's not about 2024, it's about 2022. So this year, get prepared to engage. Your primary elections are coming up. Terrible decision from the Supreme Court this week around redistricting.
Yes.
And that is about our power for the next decade. So this is a very serious thing. And they will palm us off by letting some of us be successful. But it doesn't mean that the plan they have for this country is not total control and basically just hollowing out this democracy for their own aggrandizement. And with it comes violence. With it comes further segregation. With it comes cruelty. This thing that Trump unlocked,
Yeah.
it was a door that one of the successes of the civil rights movement is that we had successfully created shame around racism. Trump said, you don't have to be ashamed. Grab them by the whatever,
Yep.
get those SOBs up off their knees. You just say whatever you want to say. And they liked it. It felt liberating. And they're addicted to it. That's why they like the coarse language, the cruelty, the vulgarity, and when they see it happen, as they saw it happen, what is dangerous about those confirmation hearings, when you hear the vehemence with which these white men wanted to talk about in detail pornography and the mechanics of partial birth abortion and penalties for rape to this black judge who has to deal with this in her job in a professional way, and already said, I still have nightmares about some of the facts of these cases, that when they wanted to keep saying it over and over again, don't think that people in your workplaces are not watching that permission and thinking that it gives them permission to talk to you anyway.
That's right. So the moral of the story, folks, is we have work to do, and don't leave your power on the table. Don't leave your power on the table. So look, we're about to get the hook, and we have been told we have time for 2 questions for Sherrilyn. So let me be clear, it's a question. Not a comment, but a question. So if we have 2 questions, you can come. I think, is there a mics around somewhere? I can't see. Okay, I have a hand up over here. We have a question. Yes.
Hi, my name is Jovelyn Pettis. I just have to say I saved my little penny so I can make sure that I heard you this morning. So that's my comment, sorry. Question, how do we, with George, of course the death of George Foreman is terrible, but with that, there was an opportunity for white people to feel guilt and like, hey, this is not okay. So how can we continue to encourage that allyship, because we do need them, whether you like it or not, to keep them on board and associate what you said as far as, hey, this is not just civil rights, this is about democracy and moving it away from your, Putin's and Trump and your authoritarianism. So do you have any advice or generalism or resources or anything that can assist me, a little black girl in Pittsburgh that works for a small company that saved our pennies to get here but truly believes in the cause?
Thank you, and I'm so glad you said that. Allyship is going to be key here. Allyship with white people. I've spent a lot of time in the last year being very explicit in my and in compelling our allyship with the Asian American community that's been suffering with this terrible rise in hate crimes. And I've done lots of public events so people can see it and understand the importance of that allyship. The same with many white people who are allies. And that's one of the hopeful things about this, too. It's not just the awfulness has been revealed. What has also been revealed are some extraordinary, strong white allies who believe in justice and equality. And you're absolutely right, we have to continue making space for them. It's one of the reasons why when I go out and speak, often this is not the room, right, where I am talking directly to them. And prepared to engage with them on these issues and to find places where we can find some common ground. And so I would suggest continuing to do that. As I said, LDF's website, which is www.naacpldf.org, and we are a separate organization from the NAACP and have been since 1957, is chock full of information. It's just, you put in the search what you want to know about, and there's usually something that gives you some of the information that you need. So please use that as a resource as well.
Excellent. Thank you. One last question. Do we have another one? Yes, right over here.
Hi, Nicole Anderson from NAL Speakers Bureau. I'm president, by the way. You talked a lot about your childhood and children in particular, and I have teens. And so I agree with you that the democracy is in peril. So how do we prepare our youth to continue this fight? Because it's not going to be over in 2024 and 2026. What can we do with our teens and our children to get them prepared for the fight that's coming for them?
When my kids were young, and thank you for that question, when my kids were young, I seemed like a bore, because I was constantly I remember after the war in Afghanistan started, and this is post 9/11, and my daughter's school her class was collecting funds for you know, people in Afghanistan, and I was outraged because I was like, aren't we bombing them? Wait, which side are we on? So I was like, you can't try to fool these kids as though we're not doing what we're doing by making them feel like they're doing something great. We're doing something that's actually harmful. And so my daughter just told me the other day, she said, I found the letter you sent the teacher. Mom, come on, man, you know. So I used to hate it. There was a big march against the war in Iraq, and I took my daughters. It was 17 degrees in Washington, D.C. I still remember it. I have pictures. We made them wake up in the morning, make signs and everything. They were like, oh, my God. I did feel like, have I risked their lives? You know, I took them to President Obama's inauguration. It was like 12 degrees. My middle daughter literally had frostbite. I was like, you're a terrible mom. But I made them engage. My daughters will say right now that NPR gives them a headache because that's what was on when I drove them to school and when I drove them home. But all of them are in the family business of service. You know, they are, you know, my middle daughter's an environmentalist. My younger daughter's huge in gender studies. My oldest daughter is amazing special ed, you know,
awesome.
Teacher and advocate. So they get absorbed, and now we talk about this stuff all the time, right? They're absorbing it. So take them out to the march with you, or take them to, you know, the city council meeting, or they'll be bored. They're going to say, why are we here? It doesn't matter. You're showing them the expectation of civic engagement. You're showing them that there's a role for you to play, even though it's not your job. And so I think that's what we have to do with our young people now, because they do, and they're smart. They know, they're seeing stuff too. They know exactly what's going on. But showing them and making it part of what our family does, you know, that we engage in this way is incredibly important, whether it's poll watching or voter registration, and let them see you reading the ballot and getting familiar with the ballot before you vote. There are all kinds of ways that you're sending signals to them about what's important. And even if they're rolling their eyes now, it gets in them, and it prepares them to be the next set of troops for the battle.
Excellent, excellent. So again, ladies, the message, do not leave your power on the table.
Leave no power on the table.
And don't let your kids either. Sherrilyn, it's been a pleasure. This has been awesome. Thank you so much. Let's give Sherrilyn a round of applause. It's great. Absolutely.